Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. We want to chat a little bit about how to find your voice when you are a minority. We work with a lot of women who are minorities, and we happened to be in an event one time, and there were probably 60% of men in the room. And normally, when we go into an audience and we work with a lot of women, they tend to be really engaged. They throw their hand up, they're throwing out answers, and we found this marked difference of the women in the room were entirely silent, and it was the men, fabulous allies, who were engaged. And we just found that really so interesting, wasn't it, Nat, that happened to us at that event?
Well, I was actually thinking it wasn't just us who noticed, someone else actually called it out as well. But I think we notice it. And all these events, by the way, are women focused events. Like the men in the room are there to try and create better spaces, more inclusive spaces. So this is like even more specific that this is when everyone's on the same team. But I've even noticed it, even if there's like a handful of men in a room full of women, that the vibe changes dramatically. And the allies who turn up are very brave and they are engaged and they are contributing, and women change how they behave and
Yeah.
significantly drop how we engage.
Yeah, well, studies show, which was, I found this stat after we did that event, but women speak up to 75% less when outnumbered, whereas men experience no participation drop when they're in the minority. I don't entirely agree with that because we've done International Women's Day events for a few years now, and there usually are a handful of men in the crowd. And you can tell their participation absolutely drops. Like I think so anyway. I've noticed that. So I'm not sure, where that
I
stat
mean, I
kind
I
of
I suppose it's hard because we don't know how they'd usually participate,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
my
true.
assumption is the men who turn up are men who are very aware of not of being inclusive, so they probably
Yeah.
are more likely to be people who adapt to their situation.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely ask, "Should I even be here? Do I belong here?" It's like, "Yes, yes, you do. Come, come, and just listen and learn," which is great. But it is real, and I was reading that it takes and I've heard this on boards as well, that it takes a super majority of women before women get equal airtime under majority rule decision making. So, let's say a board of 6 people, they're saying that there has to be a majority of women, so 4 of the 6 have to be women where they get equal airtime when it comes to actually agreeing on a decision that has to be made or voicing their opinion on said decision.
This is one of those really nuanced parts about the work we do, and I love this conversation because I feel like I have it quite often, where if you based on your experience of the world, you only get to see a small fraction of it. So, if you are someone who is in a meeting, like let's say you work in my team and I'm the manager and I'm a man, and I'm like, Kristen just never speaks up in meetings. I have no concept that when you are in a different group, you might be the biggest talker in that group. So, I have this perception of you as being quiet and introverted. But actually, what I have not done is create a space where you feel like you can speak. But I'm not aware of that because there are other people in the team who are very comfortable in that environment and they're speaking. And I think this is what we try and explain sometimes when organizations say, we don't have any problems. We just don't know why women aren't putting their hands up for leadership roles or why they're leaving or we're trying to figure out why they're so underconfident. And those are the wrong conversations to be having. The conversation actually needs to be, what is it in the environment that actually gets people contributing equally? And it's nuanced and it's different for everyone. It's not women versus men versus non-binary. It's like everyone has their own styles. But what we've noticed and what the stats point to, because we tend to study male female, is that there is a difference when we're all put in a room together.
I think it's and we are the last to be bashing at all, but I'm going to raise some terms that we are well aware of because I think what comes along with this is like anything education, and so we are most of us are aware of the term mansplaining, or manspreading, and men taking up space or explaining things to you that you very well know a great deal about, perhaps more. But there is some other terms that have gone viral in recent times. One called heap-eating. So a man that repeats, and this happened to an astrophysicist, and she was like, all of my incredibly brilliant astrophysicist, space women are being their ideas, the fabulous ideas, are being simply repeated in meetings and therefore claimed by men. And that was a tweet that went viral in 2017. So I'd never heard of it before. So I think awareness around that one, and I hate to say it, but mantruption is a thing. Men are 3 times more likely to interrupt a woman, than another man. So it's a thing.
Oh, so
Manterrupting.
3 times more likely to interrupt a woman than they are a man speaking. I was thinking about this because we are doing this week's newsletter next. I'm not even gonna try and figure out what's coming out where, but talking about the personality test we've just done, and we talk about it on the podcast too, and I am an interrupter, and I've realized that that is part of my personality type, that I move fast, I like energy, I think quickly, and I've wondered, even just writing the newsletter this week, about those in this particular personality test, if there is a tendency for women to fit into some of those categories in higher percentages and men to fit into other categories in higher percentages, and that there's the because I just came off a conversation with someone who has been told she's unconfident a lot of times, and I'm like, "Do you feel underconfident, or do you feel that maybe your communication style is different?" And she's like, "I've never thought about it. I just assumed I must be." And I just wonder if there's something in this about, like, we might fit in those different categories, nature, nurture, who cares, slightly in different percentages. And of course, the workplace norm is men because women have only really recently become visible in every part of workplaces. And so we've got this idea of how we behave that is focused around norms for men, which may be more likely to be in specific types of personalities. It was just something that struck me because I've never had a problem interrupting or being interrupted on. And I think I'm a man.
And I wonder, I mean, I again, what I think is really interesting, you'd mentioned norms, which are clearly formed both in, as in the environment that we operate in, both at home and in the workplace. And I would wager that the men in my generation were still raised in a household where the mum had a slightly lower hierarchical status in terms of decision making and a voice. In a different way, they held different forms of power, but they possibly would have viewed behavior where the husband or father, and I know I'm generalizing it, but we're talking about, 40 years ago, the man still had the final say. I mean, this was being taught in churches and in institutions of like the man is the leader of a house. And culturally, that was accepted. And so I think, again, these are men in the workplace today that unfortunately had that start in life. And therefore, I think you're right. Personality, yes. But equally, that behavior will have been modeled for some time. But I think it's changing. It is changing. It is changing.
No, I agree. Well, and actually, I think now we're talking about our generation being parented in that dynamic, that I think, I've heard that even with people doing pre-marriage counseling and just the assumptions that, of the gendered roles that had never been examined. It's just, like, so ingrained in how they were raised. That the men feel like, of course, the woman's gonna take time off, or of course she's gonna finish working, or whatever it is that they just, like, assumed is the case. So, yeah, it could equally be any of those things, and it is just interesting that I didn't realize that there were 3 times men were 3 times more likely to interrupt women, and again, it's all this stuff is so unconscious, and you may leave a meeting if you are a man going, "Oh, that was a really robust, interesting conversation," and the women around you may leave saying, wow, no woman, every time a woman spoke, she got interrupted and have perceived that exact same interaction incredibly differently and left going, there's no point even trying to chat in this environment.
Well, I think that's really interesting because it's often an experience we have at some stage in our careers or lives where we have been, I suppose, taught and or hurt as in terms of we've tried to say something and have been interrupted, or there's been a pattern that's happened, or something that's happened where we then have this belief of ourselves. And I think not only do we have this environment that wasn't designed, many environments still to this day aren't designed with women in mind, and having their perspectives championed, but equally, um, we have this learned behavior, like to your point of the confidence. She's believed that because she's been told that. So and what I'm getting to is women have a belief that maybe their ideas aren't good enough, or they have to be perfectly formed before speaking them, or they have to have a certain voice or certain behavior when they're sharing those perspectives. So in essence, even if the gender isn't a barrier in the room, they're holding themselves back, which is
Yeah.
complicated.
And this is that we talk a lot about professional baggage, and you could be in the world's most inclusive, well facilitated room. And if you are used to coming from rooms where your voice isn't heard, you're interrupted, everyone speaks quickly, there's no facilitation, you will behave differently. And so, even if you're doing everything right as a facilitator, people in the room will be bringing that baggage with them. And that's where the stuff is really hard, because you could walk out going, but I did everything right. Why didn't they behave? And it's not A plus B equals C. There's a whole bunch of these really nuanced factors that come into it that mean that we have to unpick and unwork through. So yeah, this is something that is worth everyone really thinking through. A, what am I contributing? And B, what baggage am I bringing into these meetings that maybe I can let go of, or into these conversations that maybe I can not make the assumption when I arrive this is going to be the same, and treat each one as a fresh start. But equally, if people aren't behaving the way you expect them to, get really curious about what they may be perceiving in the meeting
Yeah.
or the conversation.
So for special International Women's Day edition, we just wanted to deep dive in some tips, both for women and for allies, around this finding your voice or enabling others to find their voice in these spaces. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to start with one that we talk
Good
about.
on you for finding your voice and just stepping in and talking. I applaud you, Kristen.
You're really intimidating that, but I'm
Great
going
from
for it.
you. I actually said this to a friend at golf the other day. She did a really good shot, and I said, "Good from you." And she's like, "Whoa." And I was like, "Oh, no, that's just a saying I use all the time, but I managed to do the absolute wrong way of announcing that." That sounded so patronizing. So
I
now it's just a friend term. We're like, "Good from you."
I used to use that term a lot until my friend said it was really offensive. And it wasn't coming from I genuinely meant it. Like, good for you. That's
When I say it about other people, like, "Great from them, great from you." But then, yes, it turns out context is key in those.
Oh, yeah, no, I put my foot in it again. Okay, this is one we talk about quite a bit, and this is prep, 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 prep. Prep equals confidence. You're going into a meeting. There's something going on where your presence is expected. Therefore, some preparation is highly recommended. What is the meeting about? Do you hold a particular view? Is there a point you want to get across, a perspective, a question you want to ask? Women who feel prepared speak more. And like full stop, women who feel prepared speak more. So get prepared. There's a number of ways you can do it. Is there agenda? Read it. A little bit of research based on some key talking points of that. Fabulous. Pre-wire the meeting. We had Shelley Lombard deliver a fabulous mini masterclass to our power suitors, and she talked about before the meeting, go and she called it pre-wiring, go and chat with different decision makers and attendees of that meeting, get a sense of what's going to be tabled, what's going on, what are their ideas about this, and maybe float your idea as well, just to get some feedback or to get some advocates. So prep equals confidence.
I also loved her tip to speak first in the meeting, ask your question first, because the number of times I loved how she interpreted this. She left it for later. And I think, and so someone else asked the same question first. And I think a lot of women in that boat think, oh, that means it was a really stupid question. Whereas she was like, damn, I need to get my question out first. So everyone attributes it to me, which I really liked. The other person coming to mind of the mini masterclasses we've had is Stu Van Rye on confidence, and how we all try and tackle confidence, but actually competence is what leads to confidence, and prep gives you that competence. So, for the members who are listening, go check out those 2 mini masterclasses, because they will give you a big step forward in that meeting prep. The second one, claim physical space. This is again, gosh, We have some really great mini masterclasses. I was just thinking about the one we did on the brain body connection and how sometimes our bodies are actually giving us all the signals and that we aren't feeling confident and good, and actually learning how to reframe how you sit and hold yourself very subtly has a massive impact on how you claim physical space and how you are perceived, and how your brain works too, to get you down from that stress levels. So one of the easiest tips that we have when you are wanting to interrupt in a meeting or jump in is to signal that you're going to lean in, turn your camera on, turn mute off, whatever it is that you switch up in that moment. I clicked. Switch up in that moment to indicate I'm about to speak. We all pick up on those social cues. So face in, lean forward, change your stance when you're about to speak, look around you. And if you're someone who hasn't really considered this before, in your next meeting, virtually and in person, look around at what people are doing before they speak so that you can see those little cues and start practicing them. And when you're leaning in and when you're facing forward and really engaged, locking in with the table, it will reduce interruptions. Like we all know what it's like when someone looks down, when they're pausing, when they're like for too long, that people jump in. So, really, if you are a pauser, which is absolutely fine, how do you hold the room so people don't interrupt? That's something that we can all think about.
Yeah, I think posture does signal authority. And while you were chatting, I rolled my shoulders back and leaned in a little bit. And not only, and to Kim Berlucci's mini masterclass, is I felt a sense of, oh, it was a strange feeling. It was almost like calm by just sitting up with my shoulders up. And I wouldn't describe it as confidence, but it felt like a sense of readiness and I don't
I'm
know,
here.
a real
I'm in
sense.
it. I'm locked in.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
engaged.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Love the posture run. Okay, another tip, tip number 3, commit. We love this as an action, is commit to one idea, perspective, question per meeting rule. Create a rule for yourself where, again, your presence is, it's expensive. It is your time. You need a return on investment for that time, either in the way of sharing your perspective and enabling kind of an outcome that aligns with where your thinking is, but equally personal brand, even if it's just a question and you want to be seen and visible in a meeting, which is why Shelley was like, speak first. But commit to it, actually commit to it. Say, look, I'm spending my time here. It's a valuable resource. And so I am committing to one idea, one perspective, one question. That is a rule and actually building a habit into that.
I always find this so fascinating before our Power Match peer coaching. One of the big barriers people have is, do I have anything to add? Like if someone's bringing a challenge or has something top of mind, what do I know? And every single time afterwards, they come out going, whoa, the other person's like, whoa, they really helped me with a fresh perspective. And I think sometimes we forget the thing that we think is just like often so far out of the realms of what other people are thinking about that you will have something unique to share. And I think that leads us to my next one, which is if you are introverted like me.
We did a test one time, and I think you did land in the middle of the scale. But anyway, I digress. Go
I think
ahead. You
psychologists are actually creating a third
oh,
group, and you
autorovert or something.
yeah, and that you can
Autorovert.
jump between. I think that probably is me. This is something I am loud. This is a hot tip for anyone. You can be introverted and loud. Those are 2 separate things. It's how you get energy. But you don't have to be loud to be heard. And I just think this is such a strong reminder because I feel like this is you see it all the time. And actually, after one of our personal board of directors events, someone gave us some feedback and she said, as an introvert and as a quiet person, at the end, you know what it's like. The rooms are buzzy. There's so many people. They've just had this epic connection with a bunch of people. They're like fizzing, they're firing off popcorns of like, this is my insight, this is this. And she said, I felt like I did it wrong because we sat down and we followed the agenda and we did our bit and then we formed a strong connection and we were happy to leave. And I felt like I had missed the memo that we were all meant to be like engaging as a group, as the wider, big, 80 odd person group. And that we weren't having as much fun and that everyone else is doing this. And I thought, oh, isn't that so interesting, that interpretation? Because as far as I'm concerned, she did it perfectly. She turned up, she connected with people, she shared what she wanted to share, and then she moved on with her day. But it is so and Kyla, my girlfriend's given me this feedback too of if you're introverts and extroverts in a room, neither's adapting. Like neither is like speaking more or less or whatever. But when you are the loud group, you form the culture because you are dominant when you are loud. And it leads people who are less loud to feel like they're not contributing or can't. So, just the biggest piece of advice I can give for people trying to find their voice if they don't have a loud one or don't like to use it very often, make every word count. Like, you do not have to speak up a lot. Silence is powerful, and a few well placed words are very powerful. Again, Ashley Paholic, who is an incredible power suit expert, and she did a mini masterclass on exactly this, how to interrupt and find your voice in meetings, and was very clear that that waffle detracts. We all know what it's like, which I'm probably doing now. Waffling, you end up being like, move it along. Whereas a couple of well thought out points, bam, powerful, move on.
What was interesting? I recall coaching someone who was an introvert, and she was given the feedback that she didn't speak up enough, her confidence was low, and therefore they were holding her back for from the next step in her career. And she was really hurt by this because she disagreed. She felt confident. She felt like she knew her stuff technically. And I started, this blends with one of our other points, is I started to ask about her body language, because body language can give a huge cue from introverts. If you're looking down, if you she doesn't always like looking in people's eyes. Fine, but I said it's really important that you take some notes, because that is it gives off a message that you are engaged. And if you don't want to always look up and into someone's eyes, find a point on the wall. It could look like you are thinking or considering something, but taking notes is a real sign of engagement and allows you to put your eyes down on that piece of paper. So yeah, I
Hilarious.
love
I
that.
was gonna
Yeah.
say, since you got your glasses and then do you start taking paper notes recently, like in the last couple of months? Since you started taking paper notes, oh no, you just draw pictures.
Oh, those are notes.
Oh, are they?
Look at all the
You look way
numbers.
more intelligent. Every time I'm in a meeting with you and you, like, go to write a note, I'm like, "Wow, she's really smart. I wonder what she's writing down."
These are all my
But now
notes.
you're showing me wait, I have to take a picture of this to put up because this is a hilarious these are hilarious Kristen
I
notes.
hope there's nothing. I hope there's nothing
Give it
really
again.
sense.
I ca don't I? Chart I, chart 1. What are you doing? Okay, I am taking
I'm
that
really
back. You
smart. So
don't look
there's my
smarter at
notes.
all. You look like a
There's my
raving
notes and my
lunatic.
yellow pen. Okay, my last point. Find your person. And this is something that like, think back to a time in a meeting where someone championed your perspective or called you out and asked for your perspective, because it's likely that they knew your work. They knew you're an expert in this area, or they knew you took an interest in this area. I've been in a room where that's happened before. And immediately there's a sense of psychological safety about that. Now, that was luck. I happened to have an ally in the room who had some influence and was able to include me on the conversations. What I'm suggesting here is to look at who's in the meeting and deliberately foster a relationship with a couple of allies. Let them know what you're interested in sharing. This again goes back to the pre-wire the meeting. Give the person, look, I'd really love to share this perspective. I've got some ideas on it. So if you kind of lose your feet and have a little bit of a wobble in the meeting, that person should be able to call on you and just say, I think, Rachel's got a great idea or perspective on this. What was that you were saying again, Rach? That, so you can deliberately go and do this in the pre-wire, and or as you are building relationships with people, is again, find a person in the room that is willing to include you and to call out your knowledge and expertise.
I love that, and even if you're not
Mm.
having a wobble, some people find it really hard to find the gap to jump in, and just having your gap finder. Like, I'm a great gap finder. I'm very comfortable being like, "Oh, Kristen had a point on this," or "Oh, such and such." They'll just do it for you. So find that person, and even that just takes that effort off you to, if that's not your natural instinct, go for that. Let's move on to if you are an ally in the room, what you can do. This is one of our all-time favorite tips, and this comes from Obama's White House. And as Michelle and Barack Obama, we identify very strongly with anything related to this. When Obama took office, he had a majority of top aides were men, classic. Although he actually had about a third who were women, which is probably pretty cool for that time. But those women were getting talked over and their ideas were being attributed to the men in the team. So actually, those women got together and introduced the concept of amplification within meetings. So when one woman made a point, another would repeat it out loud and attribute it. So I want to come back to what Kristen, Sarah said about this, or great idea, Sarah. I want to add to that. And so hearing it twice by really doubling down on this is the person who said it, and I'm building on that idea. It's impossible to ignore and impossible to steal. And that meant that Obama, without knowing that this was even happening, noticed and started calling on women more. And I actually had an example in the weekend because we helped my friend move house and we were figuring out where to put the art. And I said, oh, you could put an oval mirror here, which of course no one listened to. And then someone else, like 5 minutes later, said, we could put an oval mirror here. And I was like, what? And then she was like, I was like, are you women splaining me? But she actually missed it. But she said, oh, I'm building on your idea. And I was like, that's exactly what we do. And just naming that of like, oh, building on that idea totally changes the dynamic. This was,
Building
by the
on
way, we
Nat's
were all talking at each other, so no one was to blame there.
Building on Nat's design expertise. I love it. Okay, this is great. And I watched a video yesterday on a woman sharing, it was a real story, and it was a woman that was sharing the words to use when you get interrupted. And something like, I'd love to finish my point, and then I would, be happy to hear your perspective. And, shuts the other person down in a firm but professional way. But I think that what we should be doing is actually doing that as allies in the room. When you notice interruptions, do something. Don't wait for the person to have to do it themselves. So actually, wait. I just want to hear what I don't know Karen has to say. Again, it doesn't have to be aggressive. Just a quick redirect, like let's hang on, and it just normalizes that people finishing their sentences matter. It matters.
Well, and that sort of leads on to facilitators. If you're facilitating meetings, be active. So that's one great tip is really roll back to that. And you're like, right, it doesn't have to be aggressive. Although I do think that there is a way to raise that at the start of the meeting. Let's make rules for this meeting or with a group. Like the rules of how we're going to communicate is we're going to finish what we say. And if someone interrupts, we'll just pause and hand the mic back to the person who should have it. Like really set up and get everyone to agree to those shared rules can be great. Second thing about facilitation is calling on people. Like if you're noticing there are a couple of voices that are heard a lot more, and some people do not interrupt or do not jump in. They can't find the gaps. It's not their communication style. Say, hey, did you have anything you'd like to add to that? Embrace pauses. It's okay to pause for a bit and just let people process and think so that there is time for everyone to, and again, normalize saying, I haven't got a thought yet, but I'd like to come back in 2 minutes. Like, let's just be really clear about the different styles of communication. And as a facilitator, take your job seriously. It's not just to sit there and be in the top seat, it's actually to make sure you're getting the maximum value out of the people in the room. And that means being active with how you manage it.
I think that flows really nicely to that unanimous rule thinking, and Jacinda Ardern did it, didn't she? And she effectively ran her meetings like board meetings. And in a board meeting, because of the way governance works and voting that has to happen, everybody has to have a say, and that's minuted. And so the way she would run her meeting is she would effectively ensure that every single person had shared that perspective. And that's on the facilitating and calling on people, isn't it? Is that you actually have to call on every single person before a decision making on something happens. And even if that perspective isn't, folded into the outcome, or it is one that's kind of shelved for now, fine. The point is that you're normalizing everyone having some airtime.
I have a friend who joined a board recently and she was pretty surprised. I think I've mentioned this before that the culture of the board was every board member had to participate in every single discussion and bring their perspective, regardless of what it was. And she found that really intimidating to start. And I was like, of course you should. Like, what are you doing there if you're not participating in and really deeply understanding all these different things and sharing your perspective? And I mean, obviously she felt the same, but it was just like quite I think quite a different way of raising that rule and that expectation. And I wonder if we should all see meetings like that. Like if I'm here, I should have a perspective on that. And I think that leads to better meetings anyway, because it forces you to have to create or come up with a perception or an opinion, which means you're going to do your homework, which means you're going to come better prepared. So I feel like sort of operating under that assumption, I really like. This one is something that I this is sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, listen, you introvert. We have 2 points left. Let's go.
I'd like to pass the floor back to me. No. Um, this one is one that's very close to my heart because it happened to me recently, and I feel like we're old people who repeat stories now, but I went along to a startup event, and I was one of 2 women mentors, and we were meant to be spread around the room to ask great questions and help newer startup founders understand a little bit more, find their next steps, great stuff. I come from a product background. I come from a user experience background, growth background. The other woman in the room came from a quite different background. When we got put into the topics, the 2 of us, the only 2 women in the room, got put into the HR group. And I unsurprisingly for me, sort of went, "What?" And then just kind of went with it. She went, "Uh-uh," and, like, really was like, "Dudes, dudes, we're gonna have a conversation about this," and I loved her, and we've become good friends. But this is something that we sometimes unconscious bias is real, and the guys in the room didn't realize they'd done it. They just went straight to, like, "Ladies, you'll do the HR stuff," and all of them felt, like, really comfortable with that because, of course, in their heads, that's where we both sat. And when we told them that is actually not where we sat, they were really apologetic and changed it, and it was great. And I feel like those conversations need to be had. But we could avoid that altogether by thinking about why we direct to different thing questions and different topics to different people. And if you're starting to direct, social club, culture, comms, well-being questions to women, maybe switch that and ask those same questions to the men in the room, and maybe pass the mic that way instead. That stuff makes a big difference because I've got to tell you, it was so offensive to be like, we were mortified and we had given up our time, and it was just such an obvious assumption that we were like, "Be better," but obviously they did a great job. But yeah, that stuff, it kinda goes back to what we talked about at the start. That becomes professional baggage that you are only ever called on for this stuff. You're never called on for your finance knowledge. You're never called on for your expertise and whatever it might be. You're always the culture girl, you know?
Well, and then you end up being pigeonholed. It's exact it again, because when you do speak in meetings, it's an opportunity to introduce a narrative about yourself, your personal brand, and that is someone else telling, your story. And so I love that you were able to correct that or the other person on your behalf, and in retrospectively, you thought, "Yeah, gosh, what a what
Oh,
a,
I felt it at the
um"
time. I just for a very weird moment clammed up and didn't say anything.
Oh gosh, yeah. Cringe. I just cringed. Okay, last point for you allies, and allyship. Thank you so much for listening in, by the way. Close the informal gap. And what we mean by that is women tend to do things quite efficiently, quite often because that is how we're socialized, is to get shit done. And we deliver and we show up to the meetings, we take the notes that we need to take, or we get the information we need to take, and we get on with it and get out of there. What studies have shown is that not only men are having pre-meeting, so they're having the meeting before the meeting. We talked a little bit about that in the pre-wire, but they're equally lingering and networking. So this is actually about we kind of talk to women about engaging in those things because that is part of work and politics and navigating workplace. But we would love to invite allies to consider to shut that stuff down, ensure that actually multiple people are part of any pre-meetings or informal discussions both before meetings, and then shut down anything afterwards. If we're still talking about the meeting decisions and critical topics after the meeting, well, it should have happened in the meeting. So I know it happens, but let's try and involve more perspectives than just your typical go-tos. That's it.
And I think with that as well, be aware of the topics that you're casually chatting about because I think we've both been in rooms quite regularly where the sports chat suddenly stops the moment you join in the conversation or there's just like bro chat happening and it's very uncomfortable when you're like, "Oh, I actually feel like most women are pretty comfortable engaging in that. We try and step in, but then it doesn't like no one wants to talk to us about it." Whereas and I think on the flip side, if women are talking about things that are relevant to them. And my dad got told off recently for this because he came out with a bunch of my friends and a few of them. Actually, my mum and one other were parents. 3 out of 4 of us were not 3 out of 5 of us were not parents, and the 2 parents are having no, my mum and dad are both parents, and one of my friends was, and 2 of us weren't. So they were talking about something related to kids, and afterwards dad said, "Oh." there was just so much kid chat, it wasn't relevant to me, and my mum was like, "Well, you are a parent, and actually a lot of them weren't, so you can engage if they can engage," and it was just such an interesting that he immediately pigeonholed it as l girl chat and
Love it.
didn't want to engage, and I was like, "Go mum,
Yeah.
get that out there."
Go mom, go mom. I love it. Okay, well, hopefully everyone found those tips helpful for special International Women's Day edition. We're about all waking up in the morning and doing everything we can to close all the gaps because ultimately we have better outcomes as a society, as a workplace, organizations where all perspectives are heard and celebrated and championed. Frankly, we make better decisions. And I think all we have to do is look at what is going on around us to see that there are fewer women in positions of power and influence at the moment, and it is problematic. So, thank you so much for listening. And please share this episode to every woman that you know who's struggling to find her voice right now. Hopefully, we give some really practical tips. Go ahead and action any of those if that's you. And as an ally, share it with your managers, your colleagues, share it around. I think we've taken a pretty non confrontational approach here. We celebrate everyone who is looking to I suppose, foster a more equitable world. So, thank you for sharing this episode. Any last words, Nat?
Yeah, final hot tip. If you go to tell some woman in your life that she lacks confidence, stop and think about what you actually mean by that and what specific behavior. Oh, she's writing notes while I say this. She's writing notes. Kristen's being intelligent. Stop and think about what specific behaviors they are displaying that you think they should change. And then, secondly, do you think they should change them? Or are they things that they just might do differently from you? And is this a conversation that may not need to be had?
Yes, love the tip. Love the tip. Take care, everyone. Again, we will reach out at hello@powersuit.com and we will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.